Hello, and welcome back to episode 2 of Comic Relief. I'm your host, Ms. B. I'm the Teen Services Librarian, and I am also a major comic book, sci-fi, and fantasy nerd, so I'm very excited to share with you today some recommendations for Marvel Comics. Now, just as a reminder, all of the comics that I'm going to show you today are available for free with your library card. Just head to our website, which is monroevillelibrary.org. Look for the Library Anywhere icon, and you can find the link to the app Hoopla, which you can put on your phone or your tablet and use it to be able to download all of these comics for free. And if you don't have a library card, just go to monroevillelibrary.org and you'll see the link to sign up for one without leaving your home. So if anything looks cool to you, you'll be able to get it through Hoopla. Just wanted to lay that right out there. Now, I have to admit, I am not as knowledgeable about Marvel Comics as I am about DC. I grew up on DC Comics, on the cartoons, the shows, the movies, but I really came to Marvel through the films. I saw Hugh Jackman's X-Men films and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man films when they first came out, and then I'm pretty sure I saw Iron Man in 2008 on opening weekend. So I consider myself a Marvel fan since then, but it is not my area of expertise. Still, I had a lot of fun looking up some favorite facts about all of our favorite Avengers, so I hope I get it all right. Bear with me. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll see what I can dig up. So Marvel as a company was created in 1939 under the name Timely Publications. The first comic that they published, which was Marvel Comics issue number 1, featured two superhero characters called the Human Torch and Namor the Submariner, who are still in Marvel Comics today. 2 years later, in 1941, writer-artist Joe Simon teamed up with artist and storyteller Jack Kirby to create the character Captain America. But most of the Marvel characters that we know and love today really didn't start showing up until the 1960s, when writer-editor Stan Lee teamed up with story artists like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby to create characters like Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Thor, the Hulk, dozens of other superheroes, supervillains, and their supporting characters. So if you are like me and you mostly know Marvel through the films, it can be kind of daunting to try to figure out where should I start when I look back over 40, 50, 60 years of comics history if I want to dive into a character. So I'm going to recommend some starting points for a few, not all, of the most famous Avengers. And these are just sort of my thoughts on where might be a good place to start. Everybody has a different opinion. Some of these I chose because they're so well known, best-selling comics that have won awards. Others I picked because they just seemed like a solid jumping off point where you don't have to know a lot about the character's history to get started. So we are going to begin with my personal favorite Marvel hero, Iron Man. I wish that I had the physical comics to show you because screens don't show up very well, but this is Invincible Iron Man Volume 1 Reboot by Brian Michael Bendis with art by David Marquez. The character of Iron Man first appeared in an issue of Tales of Suspense in 1963, and it featured genius billionaire playboy philanthropist Tony Stark, as he calls himself, who is kidnapped and injured by his captors who want him to build a weapon of mass destruction. Instead, Tony puts together an Iron Man suit and escapes and goes on to become the hero Iron Man. That's how he creates his first suit. Like many superheroes, Tony Stark was kind of created in response to the times. They came up with this character during the Cold War era, but as the years went on and times changed, his character was used to explore other issues, everything from the ethics of technology to alcoholism. He is a favorite character of mine because he has such growth and such a character arc in terms of what journey he has to go on to discover what it really means to be a hero, and really, especially in the later comics since the movies, figuring out who he really is. So this is a great place to start off. The first collection is solid fun and it goes to some really neat places as you read on, so highly recommended. Next up is arguably the most popular of Avengers, sorry Tony, Captain America. He was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, and by the way, if you notice that I'm not always giving credit to the creators of each of these characters, it's because it's pretty much Stan Lee and Jack Kirby with some other people coming on board to help flesh them out. But in the case of Captain America, Stan Lee was not involved. It was Simon and Kirby. Captain America first appeared nearly 20 years before the rest of the Avengers, back when Marvel was still known as Timely Comics. And he was very much a character who was created during the time of World War II. His popularity kind of waned when the war was over, and his comic was actually canceled in 1950, but since being revived in 1964, Cap has been around ever since. This is the first volume in the Captain America by Ed Brubaker series. Ed Brubaker has done a lot of work for both DC and Marvel. Very good writer. I haven't read this particular series, but it's a great place to kick off if you're a Cap fan. Next up, we have Black Widow, who first appeared in 1964. She was actually an antagonist, a villain for Tony Stark, even though she kind of has a change of heart very quickly and ends up defecting to the US from her native Russia and joins the Avengers 2 years after she had started off being an antagonist to Tony Stark as a Russian spy. She's also the one that brings Hawkeye into the fold, so you might recognize that they pulled that for the movies. She appeared on and off in a number of series over the decades, and even briefly headlined a title, but she really didn't get her first comic until about 2010. This is a comic from 2014 by Nathan Edmondson and Phil Noto called The Finely Woven Thread. Again, it's a first volume, great place to jump on, and it's really hard to see because of the glare. It has some truly magnificent artwork. Next up is Black Panther, who first appeared in 1966 as the king and leader of the fictional African nation of Wakanda, which is a very technically advanced country in the Marvel Universe. T'Challa is actually the first superhero of African descent from either DC or Marvel, beating out such heroes as Falcon, Luke Cage, and John Stewart of the Green Lanterns. He first showed up, Black Panther first debuted in an issue of the Fantastic Four, and then went on to join the Avengers in 1968, with his first series kicking off in 1973. This series is called Black Panther: A Nation Under Our Feet. It's penned by Ta-Nehisi Coates with art by Brian Stelfreeze. And Ta-Nehisi Coates is a journalist and award-winning author of books such as Between the World and Me. Coates is a lifelong comics fan, and his run on the Black Panther series is really uniquely special, and it's a great jumping on point for fans who haven't read his work before. He's been writing the title for the last few years, and unfortunately he is poised to be penning his last issue in the next few months. So this is a good time to jump on board and see what kind of worlds he's created for the character. Next up, we have Captain Marvel, the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, who you probably know is played by Brie Larson in the Marvel movies. But the character who we now know as Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, was originally known as Ms. Marvel. She was created as sort of like a Supergirl to the original Captain Marvel Superman, a female version of the male hero. As time went on, the original Captain Marvel died and was replaced by a number of other characters. It wasn't until 2012 that Carol Danvers actually officially went from being Ms. Marvel to Captain Marvel. This particular book, Captain Marvel in Pursuit of Flight by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Dexter Soy, is as I said, her first appearance in the role of Captain Marvel, and the character really owes a lot of what we love about her to Kelly Sue DeConnick, who revolutionized her for the comics. She described her as Carol Danvers in the vein of Chuck Yeager, who was the Air Force pilot who first passed the speed of sound while flying level, the first pilot in history to do that. So if you liked the movies, the Kelly Sue DeConnick series is definitely a good place to jump on to the Captain Marvel series. And look up Kelly Sue DeConnick sometime, see if you can catch her cameo in the Captain Marvel movie. Next up, we have Hulk. who debuted in 1962. Most people pretty much know the Hulk story, even if they've never ever seen one of the movies or read a comic book. He's inspired by a sort of mashup of Frankenstein's monster and the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Bruce Banner is a very mild-mannered scientist who undergoes a lab accident. Now, anytime he gets a little bit upset or a little bit angry, he transforms into the Hulk, who can be a formidable foe to his friends as often as to his enemies. This particular series is called The Immortal Hulk and is by Al Ewing and Joe Bennett. We'll probably talk more about Al Ewing later. He is one of my very favorite comic book authors that I have ever read any work from. He has a wonderful grasp of characters and of storytelling, and the work he's doing on Immortal Hulk is very unique. A word of caution, while all of these comic books I would recommend for teens, Immortal Hulk in particular has a strong horror vibe to it, so I would definitely stick to that one for older teens and into adults. But if you don't mind a little horror with your comic book reading, this is a crazy, wild ride that really explores the lines between what makes us who we are and what it really means to be a monster. It's just got some mind-blowing artwork too. You can't go wrong with it. And last but not least, Thor. If Iron Man is my favorite of the Marvel heroes, the Thor comic series is probably the series of Marvel that I actually just enjoy reading the most because of the world and the other characters. Thor debuted in the Marvel Universe in 1962 in the company's Journey into Mystery series. I'm a huge fan of both fantasy fiction and mythology, and so the Thor books, as I said, are my favorite of Marvel's offerings. Thor is, of course, inspired by the Norse god of thunder and Prince of Asgard from the Old Norse mythology, which makes him a much older character by far than any of the other Marvel heroes. But it's a lot of fun watching various writers and authors pull stories from the Old Norse mythology and fit them into the Marvel universe. If you like fantasy, if you like science fiction, if you like a good old-fashioned adventure story, you might like some of the Thor comics. There is a lot to choose from, and I really struggled which one to recommend. This is Thor, God of Thunder, Volume 1, The God Butcher by Jason Aaron and Esad Ribic. This particular run on Thor is actually not one of my personal favorites, but it ran for about 5 years and was hugely popular. If you are a fan of fantasy fiction, especially in sort of the Game of Thrones vibe, you'll probably enjoy this. We'll be back later to talk a little bit more about some of my own personal favorite tales from Asgard, but for a beginning reader, this is a good place to start. All right, well, I hope that gave you some good ideas of where you might like to pick up reading the Marvel series. Remember, you can get all of these comic books through the Hoopla app, which you can sign up for through our library website, or you could actually just search for the Hoopla app on your phone or tablet and go in that way. Thank you for joining me, and be sure to come back next time as we'll be taking a break from the two big publishers, DC and Marvel, to talk about another very wonderful world of comic books, Doctor Who. See you later.